now you started a company, and you got into the landscaping space. So you go from saving lives to cutting grass, right? So what inspired you to do this? What did you see that you said, I got to do this?
Yeah, no, that's a question I often ask myself, and I think like it's really interesting, right? So when I exited Embrace, I ended up I was primarily on the West Coast back then, and I used to travel back and forth between the U.S. and a few other countries. And then once I was done with Embrace, I ended up taking a gig at like the White House and HHS, which is the Health and Human Services Department. Uh, of the White House. And in the course of like working there, I ended up buying a house on the outskirts of DC, in a place called Alexandria. And this was the very first time in my life that I've seen like anything more than like a little parcel of grass,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I grew up in Bombay, right, which is like this urban jungle, like New York, right? Like you don't see too much of green around you.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden, I'm like in this single family home with like a huge lawn. And at first, it was super exciting. I'm like, this is really cool. Like, it's beautiful, right? Like, and I see my gardener come and like do his thing. And then it got me thinking, there's probably a way to like automate this. And obviously, I'm not the first person to come up with that idea. Many people have looked at the same thing
Yeah.
and had the same great idea. But as an engineer with a garage at your disposal, you can't just stop like at an idea. You've got to like build it, right? And just one thing led to another, and a few prototypes later, started a company.
Yeah. So I'm kind of interested in the process of that. So you
Yeah.
said engineer in your garage, you're looking out the window and you say, I could probably automate this. So, I mean, what did you do? Just go buy like the cheapest zero turn you could get and start trying to figure out how to break it down? Like I want to get in the engineer's brain.
Yeah, yeah. This is such a fun story, Like I've never seen a lawnmower in my life up until like let's say 7 years ago, right? Or I'd never seen one. And I was fascinated by how they work. Like, it's a pretty simple machine at its core, right? And it's funny you mentioned zero turns. Like in my universe, there was only that little 21-inch to begin with, right? Like you don't really have too many landscapers show up with like, like a big zero turn at your doorstep,
Uh,
to cut lawns, especially in suburban Virginia, which was really interesting. So the first thing I did was, I took apart this Briggs and Stratton like engine based mower. It was a simple gas mower. I went and bought like a hoverboard, uh, like the kids hoverboard
yeah.
thingies you have, mated the two platforms together, built like a little controller to like drive the hoverboard motors. And then initially it was all like, I was like, I'm just going to teleoperate this thing from my living room, right? I'm just going to stick a camera on it and drive it around. And once you start doing that, you realize like, hey, this is like easily even more automatable. You don't need a guy sitting behind like teleoperating it. You can apply some basic logic and start to like automate like basic aspects of mowing. And that's kind of how it all started.
Yeah. So that's actually awesome. So um I think you bring up a couple of things that are the barriers to people's minds in automation, is that people are used to a local area and
Yeah.
they're used to the grass in that area. So then they are like, this is the solution we need, but they're not thinking big enough. They're not thinking globally and or even just nationally, because I mean the American market's so large, right? So I said zero turn because of course I researched you and that's what I see, right? I see like a hydro walk behind, and
Yep.
so then tell me then, so you did the smaller one and then you kind of worked, up. So what made you realize, okay, bigger is what we need, and, kind of go from there then?
I think this is where, my co-founders should take credit, right?
Yeah.
Like, because, I started with the 21-inch and then, I got talking to another engineer friend of mine who's now my co-founder. And we both started thinking about the autonomy part of it, because he comes from like a background in machine vision at Facebook. And, I come from the engineering side. So we quickly figured out like you can automate like a platform. But then the question of what platform to automate, what's the right platform to scale with, really that decision came from like our third co-founder, Jarrett, who has spent like a decade in commercial landscaping. He's worked, it was a conscious decision. I decided to go out and seek people who are way smarter than me in like building this company, because like, what do I know about landscaping, right? Like I'm like an engineer who's built businesses before. So Jarrett was the one who brought the sort of the commercial landscaping expertise and guidance to the table to say, here's where you should be looking to like focus like the commercialization efforts. And he turned our attention away from residential to commercial, and then also away from like the 21-inch push mowers to like the commercial hydro 60-inch platform, which is kind of our workhorse right now.
So I don't know if you're okay sharing this, but to give Jared a little chance. So if he was in the commercial space, what company did he have, or does he still have, and what area was he operating out of?
Yeah, certainly. So Jared was he used to work at Brightview.
Okay.
So he was working as part of their operational excellence team. Looking at like OpEx or looking at CapEx utilization, looking at equipment. How do you sort of improve efficiencies across the board? And he's looked at everything from like the small like Husqvarna style robots to like some of the larger golf course robots. He's also looked at all these platforms, and I think he's got like a lot of experience that, or he had accumulated all that experience that helped him drive some of our decisions.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, it's always interesting, and that's the whole purpose of the podcast, is to merge a mind like that with a mind like yours. So you guys already did it, so good for you guys, but those are the types of connections that I'm hoping to make on the show. So okay, so you get it, you get this working model. You had to be pretty darn excited once you got one running, right? I'm sure that was, how did that moment feel? Break into that a little.
That was awesome. This is really funny, right? Like, so like the first thing, initially we started with a 21-inch, and then Jared was like, that thing's a toy. Like, you got to like look at like a ZTR. So I was like, okay, what's the ZTR, right? So we looked up like this thing called the Ryobi like zero turn at Home Depot, and that was the next thing we automated. And the funny part there was like the thing shows up at my house. And I'm like, how do I move this thing, right? I have no idea. You need like a trailer to move like a ZTR around. Yeah. Like, I don't even know what to do, right? And then we had to like learn how to use a trailer to like tow the thing around to like test sites and so on and so forth. And very quickly we stopped like building out of our house, like out of the garage. And we actually took up like a small office near where Jared was staying. This is across the country. We moved the operations to San Francisco, to this place called the Presidio, which is like this big golf course / federal park in North San Francisco. And then we started to like basically take over a couple of lawns over there and like have these machines move around. And initially it was all the electric Ryobi platform. And then quickly we moved on to, like the Skag standard. And then eventually we settled on like the one that we're doing right now.